Let's see. Okay. First of all, I just want to thank everybody for taking time out of your weekend to be with us for this special program. And I'd like to let you know that this is before we get started, that this is actually quite a special day, because in the lunar calendar, this is the 15th of the lunar month, which means it's the full moon day. And as such, it's a really special day to do practice. And since it's a special day for practice, it's a coincidence that we chose this day for this particular workshop. But I guess you could also say no coincidence at all, in that sometimes things play out in a specific way in order to benefit beings. So I want to first encourage all of you to turn your mind toward all sentient beings and think about their benefit and welfare, and make the aspiration that by attending this class today, that you'll be able to both benefit yourself and benefit others through this practice. And so I think that with that understanding that we have a special day today, we'll begin. By the way, I was also told by another friend that there is a partial eclipse today. It may not be visible from where we are, but it will happen this afternoon after 3 p.m. Eastern time. So again, another good reason to practice, because in Tibetan, I'm going to call it a combination of astrology and medicine. It is said that the energies of the body line up very nicely on full moon days and new moon days, so they're ideal for practicing any of the meditation disciplines. So anyhow, that being said, we'll begin. Let me ask my host this morning, my Zoom host, if we have prayers to put on screen. If we do, that would be super. And if not, we'll work with what we have here. Okay. So we're going to start in the red books. With the Mahamudra lineage prayer. And we'll be reciting this in English today, so that we can connect to the meaning. Yes, if you don't have a red book, okay, great, you're all set. Okay. So we'll have auspicious beginning. Great Vajradhara, Tilopa, Naropa, and Marpa, Milarepa, Lord of Dharma, Gampopa, knower of the 3 times, omniscient Karmapa, lineage holders of the 4 great and 8 lesser schools, Drikung, Taglung, Salpa, glorious Drukpa, and others, you who have mastered the profound path of Mahamudra, the Dakpo Kaju, unrivaled protectors of sentient beings, I pray to you, Kaju Lamas, grant your blessing that I may follow your tradition and example. As is taught, detachment is the foot of meditation. Attachment to food and wealth disappears. To the meditator who gives up the ties to this life, grant your blessing that attachment to ownership and honor cease. As is taught, devotion is the head of meditation. The Lama opens the door to the profound oral teachings. To the meditator who always turns to them, grant your blessing that uncontrived devotion be born within. As is taught, unwavering attention is the body of meditation. Whatever arises is the fresh nature of thought. To the meditator who rests there in naturalness, grant your blessing that meditation be free from intellectualization. As is taught, the essence of thoughts is Dharmakaya. They are nothing whatsoever, and yet they arise. To the meditator who reflects upon the unobstructed play of the mind, grant your blessing that the inseparability of samsara and nirvana be realized. Through all my births, may I not be separated from the perfect Lama and so enjoy the glory of the Dharma. May I completely accomplish the qualities of the path and stages and quickly attain the state of Vajradhara. Okay, the next prayer we'll recite is the refuge prayer. We'll recite the refuge prayer twice in English and the final time in Tibetan. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the assembly most excellent, I take refuge until I reach enlightenment. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I achieve enlightenment for the sake of all beings. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the assembly most excellent, I take refuge until I reach enlightenment. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I achieve enlightenment for the sake of all beings. And now we'll recite it in Tibetan. O Sanjay Chudang Soji Chona Hamla Jang Chu Pardu Dani Kyap Suchi Daji Jinso Jibe Sunam Ki Drola Penshir Sanjay Druparsho. Okay, thanks very much. I will recite one prayer of my own and then we'll begin. O Palin Sawe Lama Rinpoche Dagi Chiwar Pede Den Shula Kajin Jembo Bone Je Sunte Kusan Tugging a Drup Sal to Soul. Okay, thanks very much. So today our topic is the purification practice. One of the reasons that I wanted to give this program today is because when Vajra Master Lopan Tobden was in Columbus a few months ago, he gave the empowerment of the Buddha Vajrasattva, the Buddha of purity. And I thought to myself, this would be a great opportunity for us to study a little bit about purification practice, why we do it, what it's all about, and how. And so it took me a few weeks to get myself organized. But once I got organized, I was able to put together a program for today. In today's program, I'm going to begin by talking a little bit theoretically about what purification is in Buddhism and why we do it. And then after that, I'll introduce two practices that a person can do with the Buddha Vajrasattva as one's focus. And those two practices, how those two practices can lead to a feeling of purification and change and help to facilitate purification and change within our being. So that's what our program is going to be like today. So if we're lucky, by the end of the program, we'll be able to do a short practice together. So we'll see. In addition, for the folks at home, I just want to say thanks to all of you for being here. It's wonderful to see you here, and just really happy that you're here, and that we've had so many people sign up for the online version of this program. We have about 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. We have about 12 people here in the Shrine Room, and we have another 20 plus online. So, and I know that there will be people watching this afterward. So it's our hope that by presenting this information, you will learn something valuable for your own development. So, beginning with the Bodhisattva motivation, thinking by listening to this teaching, may I and all beings be free from suffering in the near term, and in the far term, may we attain Buddhahood. Starting with that in mind, let's talk about change. Change. Oh my goodness, change. Some people love change. Some people hate change. Some people embrace change. Some people resist change. But change, nonetheless, is the basis for all purification practice. The fact that everything is changing, and it's changing pretty much continuously. Change is the basis for purification. How is this so? If we look deeply into the practices and teachings of the Buddha, in his Four Noble Truths, he said suffering is part of life. That was the first truth known by the Noble. The second one is that suffering has a cause. The third is that suffering has a solution. Because suffering has a cause, it has a solution. It kind of follows logically. And then finally, that there's a path that leads to the end of suffering. That suffering is part of life may be something we have partially absorbed. I mean, we can accept suffering, that suffering happens maybe to other people, like people we don't know. We can kind of accept that that happens. But it's hard for us to accept that suffering happens for people we do know, people we feel close to, and our own selves. It's hard to accept suffering for those we love, and it's hard to accept suffering ourselves. So the Buddha said you have to get to know suffering, K-N-O-W. You have to get to know suffering. And when you get to know it, you see that it is pervasive. There are so many different kinds of suffering. There's the suffering of suffering itself, like, I have a headache, or the suffering of change. Yesterday, I didn't have a headache, and today I do. And then there's also the suffering that's pervasive, which is my head is wired with neurons that convey pain. It is just made that way. So all of these types of suffering happen both for others and for ourselves. And once we get to know that and understand that, we will be less likely to run away when suffering comes to our doorstep. I tell people frequently when suffering comes to us, we feel like it is, number one, undeserved, and number two, possibly wrongly delivered. Like a misdelivered package from the post office. Here, I didn't order this suffering. Could you take it, please? And what this means, even though it's a kind of a funny example, what it means is that frequently we run away when suffering happens. We try to deny that it's happening. We try to run away in one of any kind of ways, most of which are unhealthy. You know, what do they say? The big three: drugs, sex, rock and roll. You know, I mean, whatever we use to escape from suffering itself can be the cause for further suffering. And all of the resistance we feel towards suffering makes it even worse. One of my counseling friends, in her office, she has a sign that says pain plus resistance equals suffering. So I get the idea. It's a little simplistic, but I get the idea. So when we get to know that suffering is part of life, we will be less likely to run from it and to hide from it. But we may lack the tools to work with it when it visits us. We may lack those tools. We may not know what to do when suffering comes to our doorstep. And so this is part of the reason that this workshop is happening, is so that we can delve into some of those techniques and methods for working with suffering as it arises. But the Buddha didn't stop there. He said there is a cause for suffering. And the first thing he said is that suffering is not caused from outside of us. Usually we look, when suffering has come, we look around to see who or what is responsible for our suffering. We frequently look for someone to blame. Sometimes we blame people outside of ourselves. Sometimes we even blame ourselves. And all of these are, in many ways, wrong-headed, and in many ways, even more damaging. Instead, the Buddha said we should look at what is truly responsible for our suffering, and that is our own habitual tendencies towards selfishness. Selfishness and self-fixation, he said, are the root cause of all suffering. Why? Because he also taught in his book of sayings, the Dhammapada, he said, if we think, speak, and act with an impure, selfish mind, suffering is the result. And if we think, speak, and act with a selfless mind, happiness is the result. These were the Buddha's basic teachings on karma. His basic teachings on karma were that if we act selfishly, then suffering is the result. And if we act unselfishly, happiness is the result. So if we look at these teachings and delve into them a little more deeply, we'll see that there are many things that we have done in this lifetime to bring suffering to ourselves. There are many things we've done. And if we consider that we have lived countless lifetimes before this one, all of the previous versions of ourself, who may not have had our Dharma teaching and our Dharma practice, may have acted in ways even more, we'll call it damaging, than the harm that we have done in this life. The teachings of the Buddha are that we are not a solid entity, that our mind and being is not a solid entity, but is a set of processes that continue through time. The Dalai Lama explained it this way: one moment of human consciousness lays the basis for the next moment of human consciousness, and that moment of consciousness lays the basis for the next moment of human consciousness. And he said this goes infinitely into the future and infinitely into the past. So the Buddha's teaching was that our minds were never created by anyone. And since we were uncreated, we cannot be destroyed. Our minds cannot be destroyed. But he went further than that. He actually also said that the nature of our mind, even though our thoughts may be confused, our inner nature is Buddha. And that if we can practice meditation and positive action, ethics, morality, and all the rest, if we can practice in this way, we can uncover our Buddha nature and live from that place instead of living from our confusion and delusion. So in this very layered approach, in the second of the Four Noble Truths, the Buddha taught that we ourselves, both now and in the past, have accumulated many of the causes for suffering. We've accumulated many negative actions, hurting ourselves, hurting others, and that these negative actions remain in our stream of being and can gain fruition anywhere along our personal timeline, if you want to use that type of phrasing. Anytime along our personal timeline, it can come to fruition as suffering of one kind or another. And so because of this, he said we should, first noble truth, know suffering, but also know the cause of suffering, which is grasping, clinging, and fixation, particularly self-grasping, self-clinging, and self-fixation. But he didn't stop there. Otherwise, his teaching would be among the most depressing in human history. He didn't stop there. He said, because suffering has a cause, clinging, fixation, selfishness, that cause can be unmade. That cause can be undone. It can be disassembled. And this is the positive aspect of change. This is the positive aspect of change. Everything is impermanent, the Buddha taught. Nothing lasts forever. Everything is impermanent. Matter is impermanent. Science has shown us this. Matter is impermanent. Our life is impermanent. Everything is impermanent, and everything is always changing. We try to believe that it isn't, but it is always changing. And so because things are always changing, our karma is always coming to fruition. And as our karma comes to fruition, we have the choice to address it and engage with it in a positive way or run from it in a negative way. So we have this opportunity to change our own life from within. And so this is, to me, the promise of the third noble truth, is that because suffering has a cause, it does have a solution. And that solution is Buddhahood. It's the ultimate liberation from all confusion and delusion. And Buddhahood is approached by practicing the fourth noble truth, which is the path that leads to the end of suffering. So the first noble truth, suffering is part of life. Second noble truth, suffering has a cause. Third noble truth, that cause can be unmade and we can be liberated. And the fourth noble truth is the path that leads to the cessation of suffering. And the Eightfold Noble Path of the Buddha can be summarized in the four statements of the Buddha: do no harm, practice virtue, tame your mind. This is the teaching of the Buddha. Now, since that last statement is just a summary, let's stay with the three basic teachings. Do no harm whatsoever. Don't harm yourself. Don't harm others. Practice virtue as much as possible, means to take care of yourself and benefit others. And tame the mind, it means to meditate. And by meditating and taming the mind, come to know our basic nature underneath all of our confusion and delusion about reality. Underneath all of our negative mental afflictions and bad habits, there is Buddha nature. And if we can find it and work from there, then our Buddhahood will be assured. And until then, we can practice these three things: doing no harm, practicing virtue, and taming the mind, to at least have relatively more happiness in this life and less negative karma in future lives, so that even if we don't attain Buddhahood here, now, this lifetime, we can, in a future lifetime, build upon that and become Buddhas in the future. So at the very least, we'll have a happier life. Why is this so? Because when we are doing negative things, we get chased for some reason by all of the beings we have harmed. If a person is a liar, a cheat, and a steal, they end up arrested several times. They end up in jail. They end up having trouble. Sometimes they lose their money. Sometimes they lose their family. Sometimes they lose everything. They have a really hard life. Some people say, well, aren't some of the thieves in this world living comfortably right now? And someone asked Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche this question. They say, we see killers and thieves live lives of relative wealth and comfort. He said, that's because you can't see the end of their story. You're just seeing the middle of their story, where they appear to have won everything they desire. He said, but you're not seeing the end of their story, where all of that ends in dispersal and degradation and suffering and destruction. He said, you can't see that. So he said, you have to understand that even though we ourselves are not going to be around for that it is inevitable for this being to suffer the loss of everything that they stole and more. So The reason I started this part of the talk with the word change is because I wanted to immediately connect what we're going to talk about next, which is purification, with the processes that the basic processes that the Buddha taught. The Buddha taught basic processes. He taught that things are impermanent. He taught that things are always changing. He taught the Four Noble Truths: suffering, its cause, its solution, and the path. And through these teachings, he taught us how to take charge of change in our life, how to take charge of the changes that happen in our life, and how to practice with them, to not just survive them, but to thrive with them. And I'll get a little bit more into the surviving and thriving in a minute. But while I was here, I wanted to check, first of all, and see if there were any questions. I see there, yeah, okay, great. We don't have any questions at the moment. Are there any questions here in the room about what we've talked about so far? So far, so good? So far, so good? Okay. Then we'll move on to the topic of purification. I think everyone and every culture in the world and every religion in the world addresses the problem of negativity. Some people call it sin and evil, you know, and the Buddha called it wrongdoing. And what's very interesting is that in a teaching in 2018, His Holiness the 17th Karmapa made a comment about wrongdoing. He said, when things are going wrong in our life, we tend to look for enemies to blame. He said, when really the real enemy is wrongdoing, whether it's being done by ourselves or done by others, the real enemy is wrongdoing. And he said, so if you're ever having an argument with somebody, he said, try a creative approach and say, you know what? What we really need to do in this argument is team up against the real problem here, which is wrongdoing. Of course, that's probably not going to help in most conversations, difficult conversations we have with people. But I love the idea that our common enemy is wrongdoing itself. And if there's some way that we can begin to team up against wrongdoing, he said, if we can find a way to encourage people to team up against wrongdoing, he said, we might actually have some change in the world. So I like that creative approach, even if it seems a little bit far-fetched for the world that we're living in right now. In any case, what this means is that we have in our own hands the power to do wrong, but we also have the power to do right. And every culture and every religion has a wrong and a right. And they create system values and ethics based on their ideas of wrong and right. And we all have internal moral compasses and value systems by which we determine wrong and right. And ours may not be somebody else's. Somebody else's value system and our value system may clash. But every culture has wrong and right. They also have every culture also has the idea of purification, making amends, and forgiveness. Purification, making amends, and forgiveness. This is based on the fact that for Buddhists, this concept of forgiveness, change, and purification is all based on impermanence. It's all based on the fact that everything is continuously changing. And to pretend it isn't is to really, in some ways, deny reality. And to work with it is a blessing. To be able to work with impermanence and change, that's a blessing. We can actually, through these practices, take charge of our karma, purify it, and accomplish goodness as a result. I know that we just gave the shortest definition of the Buddhist teachings on karma by saying, if we think, speak, and act with an impure mind, suffering follows. And if we think, speak, and act with a pure mind, happiness follows. I know we just talked about that. But what do we do when, having accumulated negative karma in the past, we encounter suffering now? We can't go back into the past and say to previous me, hey, don't do that bad thing. You know, we all of those science fiction scenarios of people going back into their past through time travel and trying to change the course of their life. It's all based on this wish that we could go on, this deep-seated wish that we could somehow go back into our own past and make ourselves smarter. But unfortunately, we cannot go back into the past and make ourselves smarter. But what we can do is right now, we can right now work with our own minds in order to purify what has happened in the past. Now, you might ask, how is that possible? I thought that karma was the law. Okay, and that is true from the relative point of view. Now, you have to remember that when the Buddha taught after his enlightenment, after having this transcendent spiritual experience, seeing the nature of mind, the nature of reality, the nature of everything. So the Buddha, having had this vast universal experience of the true nature of everything, when he spoke and taught, he actually was able to teach on two levels simultaneously. He could both speak about the ultimate nature of all things as being limitlessness. Some people use the word emptiness. One of my teachers, Tai Situ Rinpoche, he says he prefers the word limitlessness, and that it's not nothingness, it's all potential, which I like. I really like that. He said when he hears that Western scholars talk about the Buddha's teachings on the nature of reality, saying that everything is emptiness, he says, it makes me think of nihilism and the number zero. He said, when really the teachings of the Buddha are all about the limitless nature of mind and phenomena, the limitlessness of it. And so he could teach from that level. The Buddha could teach from that ultimate level while also teaching on the relative level how those of us who are still caught in this web of cyclic existence that he called samsara, those of us who are still stuck in samsara and live under the relative rule of the law of karma, we can use relative means in this relative world to purify our relative karma and eventually achieve ultimate purification of Buddhahood. I know that sounds weird, doesn't it? That sounds like a play on words. It sounds like somebody who majored in words in college, which I did. I like to tell people that when I went to college, I majored in words. It's a journalism degree, but I majored in words and how to use them. So in any case, I'm going to repeat what I just said, a slightly different approach. The Buddha attained Buddhahood and knew the true nature, the ultimate nature of everything. So he could teach on two levels simultaneously. He could say the same words, and for those beings who were already enlightened like him, they would hear the ultimate truth. And those of us who are still confused and caught in the relative world of samsara could hear the teachings in our language, the relative language. So what the Buddha said was, although ultimately everything is is limitless luminosity. Relatively, there's this law of karma, and we must respect it while we are still in samsara. We must try to refrain from doing harm and do as much benefit as possible. We have to do that. But we can also use relative means to purify our karma. We can actually, because we placed it, we put that karma into our mind stream. We put it in so we can take it out. It's not that we put it in and somehow we're powerless to take it out because we put it there. Those of you who are familiar with the Western teacher, Lama Tsultrim Yeshe, who did the emotional healing workshops here, he has a wonderful way of talking about this. He says frequently in his topic on talking about emotional healing, he says, sometimes when people make us angry, we say that they pushed our buttons, he says. But remember, you installed those buttons, so you can switch them around. And so this was his teaching on the power of change and impermanence to help us to work with our emotional well-being. But I love the whole idea of you put them there so you can switch them around. So from the ultimate point of view, we have to attain Buddhahood before we have full purification of all of our karma. But until then, we can relatively purify our karma and enjoy the benefits of that, which is less suffering and more happiness by using these relative means. And so in the Buddha's many teachings, in the sutras and in the tantras, he gave practices, methods, and mantras in order to purify the karma that we placed in our mind stream, to purify and remove that. Now, those of you who grew up Catholic, you don't have to put your hand up, but those of you who grew up Catholic will remember that even in Catholicism, there's a practice called confession. And one goes before a priest, speaks out one's sins and wrongdoing, and then through the power of the priest's blessing and our own act of making amends through prayer and action, we purify our sin. Well, it's very interesting that Buddhism, I'm sorry to tell you, many people come to Buddhism, by the way, many people come to Buddhism and say to me, this is going to be so different from the church of my childhood. And I say, I have some bad news. Because we have some of the things about those churches that you don't like. I mean, number one, our church is not perfect. You know, we have people who are rude sometimes. We have people who are not nice sometimes. But churches everywhere have this. I have been that person who has not been nice. Confession. So we have everything that all of the churches of your childhood have, but we also have things that maybe the church of your childhood didn't have, which is quiet sitting meditation, the making of amends when one has done wrong, and so on and so forth. And so hopefully that we are, even though we are imperfect people right now, we can become better. And through change and purification, we can become better. But in any case, I tell people that there's actually confession in Buddhism too. There is confession in Buddhism too. And it consists of going in front of the Buddha, not a human being, but imagining that the Buddha is present with you and saying to the Buddha, I messed up, and please grant me purification. Because we're living in this relative world where karma is the law and so on, we have to use relative means, which consists of going to the Buddha, confessing our wrongs and regretting them, performing a remedy, which could either be a prayer or a mantra that expresses and links us to the heart feeling of regret. And we resolve not to repeat these things in the future. These are called the 4 powers of confession. The 4 powers of confession. I have a handout that I forgot to send everyone about that, and I will send it later, but I will put it on screen here in a moment. But this is about the topic of the 4 powers of confession and how purification works. So in the practice of the 4 powers of confession, let's take it apart and go piece by piece. Remember, we start with the Buddha, thinking we are in the presence of the Buddha, and we rely on the Buddha as the witness for our confession. So that's the first of the 4 powers of confession, which is reliance. Reliance. We rely on the Buddha as our witness. The second of the 4 powers of confession is regret. In order to regret our negative actions, we need to recall them. So you could say recall and regret, because we have to remember what they were. We have to go back and consciously bring to mind those things that that we've done that have caused difficulty for ourselves and others, and then feel the regret for them. And by feeling this regret, we accomplish what is called the second factor or power of confession, regret. The third of the 4 powers of confession is remedy. Remedy. We take the remedy of either reciting a confession liturgy or prayer that has been composed by an enlightened being of the past, or we recite a purifying mantra, such as the mantra of the Buddha Vajrasattva, as a remedy to the negativity that we accomplished or that we did. And we think that that remedy is purification for the wrong. And then the final of the 4 powers of confession is resolution. Resolution. At the end of our confession, we resolve not to repeat the negative action, thought, or word. And so in that way, we've actually accomplished something amazing. We have, by relying on the Buddha, by recalling and regretting our wrong, by remedying this with a prayer or a mantra, and by resolving not to repeat it, we have actually taken steps to remove the negative karma from our mind stream. I asked Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche, how does this work exactly? How does this work exactly? And I tell this story frequently. He took off his watch and he shook it at me. He said, it's not like a watch. You can't take it apart and see how it works. It just works, okay? It just works. So as a young, headstrong Dharma student, that was very helpful for me to get that message. But when I studied Dharma a little more deeply in my own practice, I began to see an interesting parallel between the 4 powers of confession and a teaching that was given by Trungpa Rinpoche on the 4 parts of an action. And so I'm going to see if I can pull that. Oh yeah, here it is. Okay. I'm going to do a little screen share, and I do apologize, friends here in the audience, that I do not have this, but it will be yours for the low, low price of $0. I will send this to everyone who attends today. I will send it through the Eventbrite platform email. On screen, we've already talked about the 4 powers of confession: reliance, regret, remedy, and resolution. Oops. And so we've already talked about that. And then performing a remedy for our action, and then making a resolution not to accomplish it. Not to repeat it. So, in Kenshin Trungpa Rinpoche's book, The 12 Links of Interdependence, near the end of the book, he talks about the 4 parts of an action, what makes an action karmically effective. And he said the 4 parts of an action are the intention, the beginning of the action, the completion of the action, and the rejoicing in satisfaction that the action has been accomplished. Frequently, when I illustrate this, I use a terrible example: swatting a fly with a rolled up newspaper. First, you form the intention. You see the insect and you say, "Dislike insect, must kill." And so that's the intention. We form the intention to do this action. And it's almost always self-centered, this intention. I must kill insect to protect self, or whatever. So the idea here is that we think about the action that we want to do. We form that intention. Now, if we stop there and don't kill the insect, it doesn't go very far, does it? The action of harming doesn't really go that far. So, but there is a karmic impression made upon our mind, Trungpa Rinpoche says, just by the intention, even if we never do it. And so that's why you have to kind of watch your thoughts, because if you build up enough intentions, even if you do not act on them, it still builds a mind state that wishes to harm. So we have to think about that. So guys and men and women of the audience, please do not entertain revenge fantasies under any circumstance. They are not harmless. I'm just here to tell you. So anyway, so the intention is first. But then you might get the newspaper and start taking action. Now, you haven't killed the insect yet, but you have raised your newspaper, and you remember newspapers. They used to be delivered on the doorstep. Anyway, so okay, so you raise the magazine, whatever, guidebook, I don't know. You raise the item and you don't finish the action. So you see that action has now gone a little deeper into your mind stream. You didn't just take the intention, you didn't just form the intention, you started taking action on it. But then, what if you follow through and kill the insect? Well, then that deepens the karmic impression in your mind stream and increases its negative potential to produce suffering for you in the future. And then finally, the satisfaction, ha ha, I killed the insect. Where you feel pleased with yourself for having done this thing. So in this way, we have completed a karmic action and have placed a karmic action in our mind stream. So I thought this might not be the watch that Khenpo Rinpoche shook at me exactly. And I am praying that a scholar in the future sees this and says, oh, she was all wrong about this. Because Rinpoche is not here for me to ask him, you know. So I made a comparison, and I'm telling everybody, this is not a Buddhist teaching. This is a Kathy thing. Person who majored in words sees connection between words, even though they may not exist. Anyhow, let's think about this. If you look at the 4 powers of confession and the 4 parts of an action, there's not really a one-to-one correspondence, but you can think about, you could kind of create one. You know, if you have this intention to accumulate this negative karma, well, you know, it can be reversed. Like maybe by the reliance step of relying on the Buddha instead of your own selfish motivation. The beginning of the action, that could correspond to the resolution never to repeat the action ever again. I mean, I don't know. The completion of the action could correspond to the remedy. The rejoicing could be the regret. I mean, right? Anyhow, whether or not these are, whether there's really a one-to-one correspondence doesn't really matter in the big scheme of things. It's my hope that by talking about this, that we come to an understanding of how it is possible, or how it could be possible, for us to purify our negative karma. But the other part that I'm not talking about here, the part that's not logical exactly, has to do with the connection of the Buddhas and their aspirations, and our faith and confidence in those aspirations of the Buddhas. Because if you read in the teachings of the Buddha about the Buddha Vajrasattva, like most of the Buddhas, his origin story begins when he was a human being and engendered the bodhisattva attitude, saying, I will become a Buddha and I will train as a bodhisattva and become a Buddha for the benefit of beings. So when he first engendered bodhicitta, he said, may my name have the power to purify negativity, the negativity of sentient beings. You know, may my name have that power. And then when he became a Buddha, it happened. And so his name is Vajrasattva. Vajra means like indestructible, and sattva means, it actually means a person who has the mind of. And so this is the person who has the mind of indestructibility. And so through his indestructible wish to benefit beings, we have two mantras that have arisen from the teachings of the Buddha about the Buddha Vajrasattva. One of these is a very short mantra that is just his name. It's just his name. Om, O-M, Vajra, V-A-J-R-A, Vajra, Sattva, S-A-T-T-V-A, Hum, H-U-M. Now, it's pronounced differently in Tibetan, but it's Om Vajra Sattva Hum. This is the 6-syllable name mantra of the Buddha Vajrasattva, and it is by far the easiest of the two to recite. There was a second mantra given that is called the 100-syllable mantra of Vajrasattva, that contains not just his name, but speaks about the power of the Vajra mind to purify. And so we have that. We have that longer mantra, Om Vajrasattva Samaya Manu Palaya Vajrasattva Tenopa Tita Dridu Me Bhava Suto Koyo Me Bhava Supo Koyo Me Bhava Anuraktu Me Bhava Sarva Siddhim Men Prayatsa Sarva Karma Sutsame Sitam Shriyam Kuruhung Ha 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 Ho Bhagavan Sarva Tathagata Ben's Vajra Mame Munsa Vajra Mama, let's see, Vajri Mama Maha Samaya Sato. So I kind of goofed up the end of it there. But the idea is that this lengthy mantra also has great power to purify negativity. And so in this way, as you can see, we have teachings from the Buddha that teach us that we accumulate negative karma through our thoughts, words, and actions, which are motivated often by selfishness. And that through practices such as the purification mantra of Vajrasattva, we can purify our karma and accomplish all of the benefits of that purification. I asked Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche one time, about this practice and mantra, I said, does it really work? Does it really work? Does it really purify karma? And he said, well, that depends. He said, the Buddha Vajrasattva said that it would. So that's his promise to us. But our faith and confidence, he said, that's like a hook. The Buddha's, the Buddha's intentions and powers and so forth are like the hook, but our confidence in their powers is like a ring. And when the hook meets the ring, then there's a connection made. And they can help lead us to Buddhahood. And so our confidence, he said, is what helps to determine our outcome. He said, if you think it will remove some of your negative karma, it will do that. If you think it will remove all of your negative karma, it will do that. If you think it will remove none of your negative karma, well, at least you've accomplished the goodness of starting the habit of reciting it. So, so he basically said that these two the coming together of these two factors, the intention of the Buddha in making the aspiration, may my name help beings purify their karma, and our intention in reciting that mantra, you bring those two together and then something beneficial can happen. So this is a little bit of a summary of what we've talked about so far. Now, this program is going to go for another hour and possibly hour and a half. So I do intend to give you a break of about 10 minutes in the middle here. But before I do that, I want to see if there are any questions about what we've talked about so far. And let's see, I see someone is asking on Zoom. Happy that you mentioned Vajrasattva's origin story. Where can we find this? Is there a sutra or commentary that you can name that includes his origin story? I don't know that one. I do not know where to find it. Oh, does Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche tell the story? Okay, can you share? Yeah, I didn't bring my copy today. Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche, thank you so much. Do you have a sense of where that is? It's just near the beginning. Yeah, let's okay, let's give it a shot. If we can't find it right now, friends, we'll look it up while we're. Don't see it here. I'll tell you what, we'll look it up during the break and get back to you on this, but I think that's a really powerful, yeah, I forgot about, yeah, you reminded me about this teaching. That's really true. Taking a quick look here. Yeah, I'm going to have to look it up, but the answer is yes, you can find this. And as a matter of fact, there's in Bokhar Rinpoche's book, Maintaining the Bodhisattva Vow, or Taking the Bodhisattva Vow, he talks about another prayer, which is of confession, which is the prayer of confession before the 35 Buddhas. And he talks about the origin story of the 35 Buddhas that are mentioned in that prayer. How through their own practice of purification, they were able to purify negative karma, and how this sutra of the 3 heaps, which tells their names, which offers their names, is a purification. So that's in Bokhar Rinpoche's book. But as for the others, we'll have to look through our commentaries and see if we can find that. But I appreciate you asking, and we'll see if we can't find that. And then another question from online. The practice of Vajrasattva mantras for specific wrongdoings I can recall, and also I chant the mantra for purifying that I can't recall. Thank you. Yeah, that's actually true. When we get into the step-by-step instructions on how to do Vajrasattva practice, this will come into play, and that will be in the second half of our program today. Will be the actual practice of Vajrasattva. I'm going to give you 2 methods. of practicing Vajrasattva, both given by Vajramaster Lama Tobden that you could use in order to purify negativity. That way, he said, anybody who has received this empowerment, as well as those who are interested in purification, can also practice these. So yes, and so in fact, I think Larry is the person who mentioned this online. In fact, Khenpo Rinpoche said it's possible to, even for wrongdoing that you do not remember, you can actually say for everything, this purifies everything, even things I do not recall. Although in the prayer of confession before the 35 Buddhas, it enumerates virtually all of the classes of negative action that a person could have done, and enumerates them all. Let's see. There's another person asking a question online. I have heard of the 6-syllable mantra of Vajrasattva. Yes, this is the okay, that's a third question. I have heard of the 6-syllable mantra, but it has not been part of my Ngondro reading transmissions. I struggle with the 100-syllable mantra. I've wanted to switch to the 6-syllable and do 400,000 or something. Do I just get it more? Any guidance? Boy, I tell you what, I do not know what to say about that. I think that there is benefit to doing both mantras. And I think that if you're interested in changing the character and style of your Ngondro practice to fit your circumstance, that this is probably best discussed with the Lama who is your instructor, your Ngondro instructor, or who you consider to be your teacher. I think that would be the best person to discuss this with, because I myself see no harm in it, but by the same token, I can't say to this person, oh yes, you're my student, and yes, you can do this, because I can't really interfere in the relationship a student has with their teacher. So if this is possible to our friend online who is asking this, this would be really great. I heard that Vajrasattva is an emanation of Vajradhara in Sambhogakaya form. Could you talk about that? I don't know about that. I'd have to research that, and I'm sure it's in one of the larger textbooks on this. But it can be known. And then another question online: is there a way I can better regulate my breathing during mantra recitation so as not to interrupt it so much to get air? Do monks use circular breathing at all? Boy, I wish I knew the answer to that question. I know that jazz musicians use circular breathing in order to continue playing their horn instruments, their brass and woodwind instruments. But so it stands to reason that someone who knows circular breathing, which is the ability to both breathe out through the mouth and breathe in through the nose simultaneously, it stands to reason that a person would be able to do that with mantra recitation as well. But I don't know the energetic consequence of circular breathing on a person's subtle energy. And so I can't necessarily recommend it, because everybody's energy body is different. And for some people, that type of breathing might actually be harmful. It might put their inner winds out of balance, and it would maybe cause physical or mental illness. So I couldn't recommend it to somebody. Again, you would need to go to an expert in this type of yogic practice in order to know what's right for you. Here's what I did to my friend Chris, who's asking this question. I just took a breath and swallowed while I was doing mantra recitation, because what can you do? We are humans and we have systems and they work a certain way. And if you have to take a breath in the middle of Om Benza Sato Samaya Manupadaya Benza Sato, yeah, if you have to take a breath during the recitation of the mantra, there's no harm in that as long as you continue to pronounce it. I can't see a downside to it. As long as you are mindful and keep the recitation going and don't fudge, or omit syllables. Are there any other names for Vajrasattva? Oh, I see. I missed two. I missed three questions, I think. Oh, yes. Someone made a comment about the prayer of confession before the 35 Buddhas and saying, isn't this also called the Three Skanda Sutra? It is, or the Sutra of the Three Heaps. Then another person is asking, what would happen if you repeated a wrong syllable while doing the Vajrasattva practice? Well, it wouldn't be as effective, I can say that. I don't think anything bad would happen. But I think that this is why in the practice of accumulating Vajrasattva mantras, there are so many mantras accumulated. So, for example, those of you who are engaged in doing what's called the Mahamudra Ngondro practice. The Mahamudra Ngondro is Ngondro means preliminary. And so Ngondro means that which goes before. So Mahamudra being the highest meditation practice of our Karma Kaju lineage, to approach Mahamudra practice, you have to complete some preliminaries, purifying negativities, accumulating merit, and connecting to the lineage through Guru Yoga. So each of these has to be done or recited 111,111 times. And many people have asked Rinpoche and then later me, why the 111,111? What's up with that? And the answer is precisely because of questions like James's question here online, because we're going to make mistakes. And so the Tibetans call these extra mantras fulfillment mantras. They fulfill any mistakes in your attitude, in your pronunciation, and everything. So any mistakes are covered by these fulfillment mantras. And the way it was explained to me that for every 100,000 mantras, you recite 10,000 as a fulfillment of the 100,000, and then 1,000 mantras as the fulfillment of the 10,000, and then 100 in fulfillment of the 1,000, and 10 in fulfillment of the 100, and then 1 in fulfillment of the 10. So in other words, 111,111, the 11,100 are fulfillment, and they help to fill any gaps or mistakes. Because human beings, that's the reason. Why? Because human beings, we have doubts and we have concerns, and the Buddhas are so smart, they've addressed all of our concerns and doubts. And the other person is asking, let's see. What happens if you repeat a wrong while doing the Vajrasattva practice? Oh, and I thought about wrong syllable, and the person says maybe he meant a wrong action. Oh, well, you can always include wrong actions, as you think of them, just keep including them. Because I asked Rinpoche one time, why do 111,111 Vajrasattva mantras? He said, because you've lived countless lifetimes and you couldn't possibly purify all of your actions, the first time through, because he said, your belief is probably not that strong. So because once again, human beings and the things that we doubt and have concerns about. But is there another name for Vajrasattva? Yes, the Tibetan pronunciation of his name is Dorje Sempa. And that's D as in David, O-R-J-E, which means Vajra, Dorje, which means Vajra. And Sempa, S as in Sam, E, M as in Mary, P as in Paul, A. Sempa means the same thing as Sattva, the being with this mind. Now, any questions here in the room because my friends on Zoom have been very voluminous. Would you be all right using the microphone for this so that people on the recording can hear you? Yeah. Thank you.
Hi.
Hey.
The handouts you gave us online, those I believe use the Tibetan pronunciation of Vajrasattva. But is it important or not important to use one Sanskrit or Tibetan?
Oh, right,
or the
exactly. That's an excellent question. I thought that one of them had the Sanskrit and the other one had the Tibetan. If I gave you two Tibetan pronunciations, I'm sorry, and I'll make sure you get the Sanskrit one. Everybody has a different opinion about this. Many people, including His Holiness 17th Karmapa, feels that Sanskrit, since these were given in Sanskrit, they should be pronounced in Sanskrit. But then people like my teacher, Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche, say, well, the Tibetans have been pronouncing them the Tibetan way for centuries and they still get purification. So he felt that it was not critical. It wasn't a vital point that you recite them in Sanskrit. So I leave that to every individual person to make the decision. Because according to these two great masters, you can't make a wrong decision. Sanskrit pronunciations got a blessing. Tibetan pronunciations got a blessing. So whatever works best for you personally.
All right, thank you.
Okay, yeah, no, that's great. A person is asking, how do you know if a practice is working? We will get into that in the second half. There's time for one more question if there's one more here. Okay, well then we're going to pause the recording. And then when we come back, we're going to talk about the two actual practices, one after the other. Okay, so I'm setting a timer for 10 minutes and I'll see you back here in 10. Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you. Okay, thanks. I had to do a little bit of looking, and we did a little bit of looking through the two commentaries by Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche regarding the Vajrasattva practice. And sadly, we did not find the origin story of Vajrasattva. So we'll continue to do a little bit of searching for this and see a reliable source of information about that for you. Okay. So refreshing our bodhisattva motivation. Refreshing our bodhisattva motivation, we'll move into this next part of the class. In fact, Don and I were talking about this during the break, and I wonder if you could put the camera on the image of Vajrasattva, and then we'll introduce people to Vajrasattva, how he appears. There we go. And what you'll see here is a Buddha that is wearing ornaments, silks, and jewels. And the ornaments, silks, and jewels symbolize the qualities, all of the qualities of wisdom and compassion, and so on that are part of a Buddha's manifestation. And so he's wearing his hair in a top knot, which symbolizes that enlightenment is singular, but the hair flows freely on his shoulders, showing that its manifestations are many. The the five jeweled crown is a symbol of his accomplishment of the five wisdoms of the five Buddha families. And he himself actually is considered to be the Buddha of the sixth Buddha family. So that's another way of looking at him. And that he embodies all of the Buddha wisdoms in one. His right hand is holding a vajra to his heart, and his left hand is holding a bell to his hip. And so this gesture is a way of expressing his pure accomplishment of both wisdom which is symbolized by the bell, and skillful means, which is symbolized by the Vajra. He's sitting in the Vajra posture, which symbolizes that he never moves from the state of Buddhahood. His Buddhahood is complete. He's sitting on a lotus flower, which symbolizes loving kindness, and a moon disk, which symbolizes compassion, which Buddhas and Bodhisattvas have in powerful measure. And so when we visualize the Buddha Vajrasattva, we can visualize this form. And the two meditations that were suggested that I teach today by Vajramaster Lama Tobden, one of them involves you visualizing the Buddha Vajrasattva in front of you and slightly elevated above where you're sitting. Not that he's over top of your head, not that kind of elevation, but he is facing you, in front of you, facing you, and slightly positioned slightly above you in space on his lotus and moon disk. He's visualized for the purposes of both of these practices as being made of pure light that shines white mainly, but also has a bit of radiance of the 5 colors to it. So he shines with this iridescent hue of white. And so for the first of these practices of Vajrasattva, there's no text. There's no text. There's merely a visualization. And you can start all of these practices with a simple recitation of the vow, of the prayer of taking refuge. I take refuge in, from now until enlightenment is reached, I take refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha for the benefit of all sentient beings, and so on. So you can do this very, very simple prayer, or the 4-line refuge prayer. From, from now until enlightenment is reached, I take refuge in the Buddha, I take refuge in the Dharma, I take refuge in the Sangha. Through the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may we attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. That's some statement, that's some rephrasing of the 4-line refuge prayer. So you can begin any session of practice with this formula. And it's important to do that if you're doing Buddhist practice. And Taisha Rinpoche said that the reason for this is that once you have stated your refuge, take refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, and your Bodhisattva motivation for the benefit of all sentient beings, once you have stated that, everything that follows it will help to bring about Buddhahood for you, will bring about the increase of your Bodhisattva motivation, and so on. And that's why you begin with refuge in bodhicitta and always end with a dedication. To that end, a little parenthetical statement here. I was reminded just now that the text that I sent lacked a dedication prayer, and I do apologize for that. I found out about this last night, that it was missing. I will create a new file that has the dedication prayer in it. So I'm sorry it's missing from the final one. I either have to rescan or go back over my previous scan and reformulate it. So you'll get a new copy with the dedication in it. So again, starting with refuge and bodhicitta, ending with dedication, everything in between is embraced with the bodhisattva motivation, which elevates it to a path that accomplishes Buddhahood for us. Now, I want to share, to do a share of, you're going to say, why are you sharing this? But it's because it actually talks about what Lama Tobden told me to teach. He said, you can tell people to do the Vajrasattva practice as a form of guru yoga. And I said, really? And he said, yes. And as it happens, Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche spoke a very simple guru yoga that I'm going to share with you. Those of you who are watching this online, you can see it, but I'll read it to those of you who are here in person. And I will, again, add it to the list of handouts that you receive. So here's what Rinpoche says about how to practice Guru Yoga. He says, you can practice Mahamudra meditation at the end of a deity meditation through dissolving the deity into yourself and letting your mind rest. But you can also practice Mahamudra through the practice of visualization in Guru Yoga. And he calls this the practice of mixing your guru's mind with your mind. Because what happens is you visualize your guru, usually in the form of a Buddha or Bodhisattva, again, in space in front of you, and imagine that light pours into you from the form of your guru and purifies your negativities, and it gives you the power and strength of practice. And so this is what happens in a Guru Yoga. And then finally, the guru dissolves into you, and you think that your mind and the guru's mind have mixed inseparably. And Rinpoche says, even though we might think that's impossible because our guru is a great being and we're just ordinary, he said, don't worry about that. He said, the nature of your mind is perfect purity, and the nature of the guru's mind is perfect purity. And so because the nature of your mind and the guru's mind is actually the same, it's like water being poured into water when you imagine that your mind and the guru's mind mix inseparably. Those of you who know Dharma terminology will know that another word for perfect purity is the enlightened mind of the Buddha, Dharmakaya. And so because the nature of your mind is Dharmakaya and the nature of the guru's mind is Dharmakaya, when you imagine that they are mixed, it's like water being poured into water. Now you may ask, why do I visualize the guru as a Buddha? Well, there are a couple of reasons for this. Number one, by seeing your guru as a Buddha, you receive not just the blessing of your guru, but also the Buddha that you're visualizing. And number two, by visualizing your guru as a Buddha, you don't get hung up on their physical and emotional components. In other words, he said, if you visualize your Buddha as Vajradhara or as Vajrasattva, you see that being not as being made of flesh and blood, but being made of light and insubstantial. So that when you do a visualization for the Guru Yoga, you don't visualize a flesh and blood person. You visualize a being made of light, which is really, in a way, closer to reality anyway. Because Khenpo Rinpoche said, if the nature of our minds is limitless, luminous, limitless emptiness, he said, well then, yeah, visualizing a Buddha as being made of light, that's your emptiness aspect, but made of light is also the luminosity aspect of your mind. And so basically, by visualizing your guru as being made of light, it's actually closer to what your guru really is, empty luminosity. The form that you see of the Buddha Vajrasattva for the purposes of this meditation is empty, completely empty inside, but made of light, but shines light upon you from the forehead, throat, and heart. And we'll explain that as we go through the meditation. So this is a general statement saying you begin the meditation by visualizing your guru in the form of a Buddha in front of you. And Vajramaster Togden said that if you don't have Khenpo Rinpoche, when he taught this, he said, if you don't have a human guru, that's okay. You can just take Vajrasattva or Vajradhara as your guru for the purpose of this meditation, which sounds good to me. So he says you begin by visualizing the guru above your head or in front of you. In front is much easier. The guru should be visualized as totally insubstantial. This guru should be visualized as being made of light rays and light, and as the embodiment of the compassion and wisdom of all Buddhas. So thinking of the guru as being present in front of you in the form of Vajrasattva, he said, then you pray. You can use a specific practice liturgy, or it's just simply whatever you wish to say. You might be doing the practice he said you might be praying for wisdom, or you might want to confess something that is bothering you. So in any case, you pray to the Buddha saying, please purify. In this case, you would say, please purify my negativity and grant me your blessing and purify my mind. And then he says, after you've done this, you take 4 empowerments from your guru using imaginary light. It begins with white light rays from the forehead of Vajrasattva coming to your forehead and being absorbed into your forehead. And this light purifies all of your negativities of body, all of your negativities of body. This can be illness, this can be wrongdoing committed with your body, and so on. So all negativities of body are removed by the white light that is purifying you. After you've done that for a few moments, then you can see that red light comes from the throat of the area on the front of the throat of the Buddha Vajrasattva. And this red light is absorbed into your throat. And this purifies all negativities accomplished with your speech. Maybe you've used harsh words. Maybe you've been cruel to someone verbally, or some other type of verbal wrongdoing. Maybe you've told a lie. Maybe you have some regret about this. So you imagine this red light comes from the guru's throat to your throat, purifying your negativities of speech. After you've done that for a few moments, then blue light comes from the heart of the Buddha that's in front of you and comes to your heart. And it purifies all negativities associated with the mind. You can actually see it dissolving your bad habits. You can see it dissolving your negative attitudes and thoughts about yourself and your negative attitudes and thoughts about others. You can see all of these being dissolved by the blue light that comes from the guru's heart to your heart. And in this way, they call these the 3 empowerments: the empowerment of body, speech, and mind. They have other names as well, but for this purpose, we're just going to call them the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd empowerments. But there is one more, and it is called the 4th empowerment. And this is, I guess you could call it the empowerment of the totality, because at that time, you see all 3 lights coming simultaneously. White light from the forehead to your forehead, red light from the throat to your throat, and blue light from the heart to your heart, purifying any remaining stains and negativities and bad habits of body, speech, and mind. Then he says, following that, think that the guru melts into light. So the figure of Vajrasattva made of light dissolves into light and then dissolves into you. And you can see this in one of 2 ways. You can see it forming into a stream of rainbow light that comes down through the top of your head and merges with your mind that way. Or you can see it coming toward you as a mist of light that dissolves into you from the front and mixes your guru's mind with your mind. And then you sit there quietly thinking that your mind and the guru's mind, or your mind and Vajrasattva's mind, have been mixed, like water being poured into water. And then it is said that this is why it's very important to see this as light and not as being something solid. And then he concludes this by saying, through mixing your mind with the guru's mind, the qualities that are characteristic of the guru's mind will start to manifest in your mind. And so I thought it would be, this was the very first, and then you would, of course, dedicate the merit of your practice. And so this is the first meditation that Vajramaster Lama Tobden said that I could teach. It's very simple and it doesn't require a text. And you can do it with a personal statement of refuge and bodhicitta and a personal statement of dedication, or you can use prepared prayers that you already have. So that's the first way that you can use a visualization of the Buddha Vajrasattva. Since you have received his empowerment, this is the first way that you can use a visualization of him to purify you. And you can do this every day if you want to. It doesn't, as you can see, it doesn't really take that long. I recommend that people do it. When they do it with a relaxed mind and a mind without worry or anxiety. Just imagine that the light comes to you and removes any worry or anxiety that you have. The white light comes from the forehead, the red from the throat, and the blue from the heart. First one at a time, purifying body, speech, and mind. And then all three lights at once, removing any residual negativity. So I'm going to see if there is, does anybody have a question about this particular technique? This one's pretty easy, right? Because and this one will be very, very easy to do. And it was so interesting talking to Vajramaster Lama Tobden about this, because after saying, oh, you could teach them this Guru Yoga with the Buddha Vajrasattva as your focus, then he said, but of course, he said, you could also teach the Vajrasattva practice as is taught in the Mahamudra Ngondro text. And for that, I will refer you to the traditional Ngondro commentary by Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche, which is based, he spoke, two commentaries. One is a commentary on the Ngondro practice itself, and the other is a practice commentary on Vajrasattva by itself. I'm going to be basing, of the two of these, I'll be basing my presentation on the Ngondro presentation, since this is what Vajramaster Tobden mentioned in his advice. This will be using a visualization of Vajrasattva above your head instead of in front of you. And it will use the 100-syllable mantra. Although I see no harm in a beginner reciting the 6-syllable mantra at the beginning. I personally see no harm in that if you have the feeling that it is beneficial. However, those mantras that you recite would not count toward your Ngondro accumulation. The reason I need to say this is because when I spoke to Vajramaster Lama Tobden, I said, Lama, I know two questions that are going to be asked when I teach the practice that is in the Mahamudra Ngondro. Because the Mahamudra Ngondro is 4 practices of 111,111 accumulations, each one. I said, people are going to ask me 2 things. They'll say, number 1, I haven't started Ngondro yet. Is it okay if I do this practice? And the answer to that is, yes, it is okay. Lama Tobden said you could do that. You could do this practice even if you have not started the Ngondro formally. At the conclusion of the class today, I will give the reading transmission because I can't give it on the recording unless I ask the person who's recording. Can I ask the person who's recording to pause the recording while I do the reading transmission? Can I do that? I'm not sure. Okay, I think that's possible. So I'll give that in a minute or 2 then, rather than waiting till the end. So, so he said you could give the reading transmission for it, and then people could do it. And I said, and I know the second question they're going to ask is going to be, I haven't started Ngondro yet. Can I count these anyway? Can I count these recitations of the 100-syllable mantra anyway toward my Ngondro that I may eventually start someday? And the answer is, he thought about it for a second, then and he said, sure. So there you have it. Vajramaster Tobden said that you could count these toward your accumulation of 111,111 100-syllable mantras of Vajrasattva. Okay, get that clear. 100-syllable mantras of Vajrasattva. So I figured that I had a feeling that these questions would get asked. And so I asked ahead of time for you. So now we've got answers to both of those. Okay, so I'll do the reading transmission for the Vajrasattva practice. I will read this to you in Tibetan, and it's okay if you turn off the recording now. All right. So now what I'd like to do is I would like to introduce you to the visualization for this practice. The visualization is, let's see if I can get it here. It's composed of parts. And I'll begin by encouraging you to use your imagination to imagine that above your head in space, that you will, let me see if I can get this on screen for you. Stand by. See if that did it. Oop. Yeah, there we go. Above your head, about the distance of a cubit, which is the distance between the elbow and the tip of the middle finger up in space. You can either see a white Tibetan letter PUM, which is in the upper left of your drawing set. If you have the drawing set in front of you, it's in the upper left corner, the seed syllable PUM. Now, if you can't see that, no problem. Just visualize a sphere of white light that changes immediately into an open lotus flower. PUM transforms into a lotus flower. And then resting above that is the seed syllable Ah, which is the second letter in your set of illustrations. And this Ah becomes a disk of the moon. Again, if you can't see the Tibetan letter, you can see a small sphere of white light that transforms into the moon. And then on top of that, lotus and moon seat, you will see the white letter Hong, which is the next Tibetan letter in your drawing set. And if you cannot see the letter Hong, no problem. Just see a sphere of white light that then transforms into a Vajra standing up on the lotus and moon disk. The Hong transforms into the Vajra, and that in the center of the Vajra, there is a sphere, and inside that sphere is a white letter Hong. Again, if you can't see Tibetan letters, no problem. There's a small sphere of white light in the center that stands in for the seed syllable Hong. Light proceeds and shines from this Hong in the center of the Vajra that's above your head. Light first goes out and up to make offerings to all of the enlightened beings in the universe. And then secondly, the light goes outward and down to all sentient beings in all realms of existence, from the highest to the lowest, and it purifies them of all of their negativity. These lights, both that have gone up and gone down, go back into the center of the Vajra, which then transforms into the form of the Buddha Vajrasattva. He is sitting on this lotus and moon seat above your head. He is holding a Vajra in his right hand at his heart and a bell in his left hand at his hip. He's dressed in magnificent silks and jewels. You see him as facing out the same direction you are, so that your right hand is the same side of his body as his right hand, and your left hand would be the same size. Now, you don't have to change your own physical posture to match Vajrasattva. You are your ordinary self for the purpose of this meditation. But your guru in the form of the Buddha Vajrasattva, made of light, is now resting above your head. My teachers have all told me that when we first start practicing visualization practice, our visualizations will be very imperfect. We will never see them as clearly as we can see them with our own eyes. Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche said, sometimes you'll visualize a Buddha above your head, and then the Buddha's face will disappear, or their torso will disappear, or their feet will disappear, or the lotus will disappear, or the whole thing will disappear. He said, don't worry. He said, just think that in the space above your head is a Buddha shining with white light. And he says, if you can't see it, just feel that the Buddha is present. Just know that the enlightened one is there. And then you can think that from the forehead and the throat and the heart of this Vajrasattva that's above your head come lights that go out to all directions. And that from his forehead, his throat, and his heart, light comes out. And also from deep inside his heart, where there is a seed syllable hung resting on a moon disk, also light comes out, and it goes to all directions. You can see these as being specific colors: white light from the forehead, red light from the throat, and blue light from the heart, or just see the light. And that from all of their places in the universe, Buddhas and Bodhisattvas come streaming to your location, and they dissolve into the Vajrasattva Buddha that's visualized above your head. And in this way, the Vajrasattva above your head becomes the summary of all of the Buddhas, all of the Bodhisattvas, all of the Lamas, the Yidams, the protectors, all enlightened beings are present within the Buddha that is above your head. And all of these steps can be done before you even chant a word of the text. And I tell people, just take your time, do them one by one. The palm becomes the lotus, the ah becomes the moon, the hung becomes the Vajra. The Vajra sends out light above to make offerings, below to benefit beings. The lights return. The Vajra becomes Vajrasattva. And then Vajrasattva himself gives off light that then invites all of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas from their pure realms to be present above your head in the form of the Buddha Vajrasattva. And if all of that is incredibly difficult, Khenpo Rinpoche said, you can just start by seeing Vajrasattva above your head and believe that Vajrasattva is present with you. That's all you need. This gradual development of the visualization is explained by Jamgon Khantrul the Great in his book, Creation and Completion, Essential Points of Tantric Meditation, by saying that if you think about it, these steps correspond to the meeting of male and female elements, physical elements at the time of conception. The male element and the female element come together and create a child that later is born. And this is what you might call our confused origin. in this samsaric world was our conception in this life. You could say that's how confusion began for us. But Jamgon Kongtrul says, by reenacting this in a pure way, we accumulate merit toward becoming a Buddha and having a pure birth in the future. So in a way, we're rehearsing our future birth as Buddha. This is kind of lovely that way. So for the sake of time, I'm going to show you the text, the portion of the text that this covers. I'm going to be using the text that I sent to everyone. And we'll see if we can get that on screen. Here we go. It says in English, it's the page that has the little picture of Vajrasattva in the center of a text. It says, above the crown of my head on a lotus and moon seat is Lama, Vajrasattva, white in color with ornaments. He has one face and two hands. His right hand holds a Vajra and the left a bell. He sits cross-legged. Then in the small print at the bottom of that page, it says rays of light. I have to make it larger. Rays of light from the heart of Vajrasattva invite the assembly of wisdom deities who merge with him so that he becomes the essence of all the jewels of refuge. And then, so you would do the first part of the visualization before you even read this text. And then seeing the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas come and merge with him, you would do after reading these lines. And after he becomes the summary of all Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, then you address him with this page. Oh, Lama Vajrasattva, please clear away and purify all negative actions, obscurations, mistakes, and transgressions of myself and all sentient beings who are as limitless as space. Then, having made this request, a hum letter appears on a moon disk in Vajrasattva's heart, surrounded by the 100-syllable mantra from which a stream of amrita or nectar flows. Falling from his form, it enters my body through the opening at the crown of my head. As my body fills, all of my unskillful actions, obscurations, mistakes, and transgressions are purified. And so for the purposes of this practice then, we think that in the heart of the Vajrasattva, at our heart, is a moon disk, upon the center of which stands a hum syllable, and that surrounding it, arranged clockwise so that it could be read from someone standing in the center. If someone was standing in the center, you could read Om Vajrasattva Samaya Manupalaya, and so on. It almost goes all the way around 3 times. It's like 2.5 circles of a spiral, coming from starting at the front of the body and going all the way around at least once and maybe almost twice. And Khenpo Rinpoche said, now I know that it's hard for you to visualize Tibetan letters. So he said, so you can see them as being like pearls. Iridescent pearls made of light. He says there's no string connecting these iridescent pearls made of light. They're just, you just see these beads of light hovering above the moon disk in the heart of the Vajrasattva above you. And he said, what happens then is, he said, as you recite the mantra, nectar flows from these letters. He said, it's like the water that runs off of melting ice, but the letters don't get smaller. He thinks of everything, Rinpoche. The letters don't reduce in size. They merely give off this purifying nectar that then falls from the heart of Vajrasattva into his form. And if you look at the picture of Vajrasattva, you can see the description right here. Okay, let's see. If I can get that picture in front of me. Yeah, here it is. So it starts in his heart, and then it drops down to fill the lowest part of his body, which for us is his right foot that is dangling over our heads off of the lotus flower upon which he sits. It fills his body like as though his body were a crystal, made of crystal. It's non-solid, it's made of light, but this white nectar fills his entire body. It fills his right leg, it fills his left leg, it fills his torso, it fills his arms, it fills the top of his head to the very top of him. Once he is completely filled, excess comes out of the large toe of his right foot that is dangling above your head. And then if it is said that the crown of one's head in the Buddhist tradition is 8 finger widths back from your original hairline, gentlemen, and it goes into your head at this point, which is called the aperture or the opening of Brahma. It has to do with Vedic medicine. So the idea here is that through this opening comes white light, which is purifying in nature. And this purifying white light then causes all of our negativities to coalesce into physical forms, or they're imaginary forms, but he said, Khenpo Rinpoche said, you can see them as being ugly creatures or insects or creosote or goo and so forth. And that all of this begins to coalesce, and it's all of your negativities, all of your bad habits, all of your negative karma from all of your previous lifetimes. It coalesces into this horrible looking goo and creatures that first exit your body through the orifices in the lower part of your body, but then begin to come out all of the pores of your body. And the earth, instead of it running across the top of the earth opens to receive it. And inside the earth, you can imagine either one or many monstrous creatures with large mouths. And they actually consume all of this ugly froth that comes from us. And Khenpo Rinpoche said, whether you see them as one or as many, he said, know that these creatures symbolize every being you have ever harmed. When you were your previous you and you killed, when you were your previous you and you beat people, when you were your previous you and you harmed beings in any way, all of them now receive this goo from you, and they think, now I have them. I have received my repayment for the karmic debt they owe me. So he said, think that as this goo is leaving your body, you are actually still looking like you, but it looks like you're now made of crystal. The form of your body is now a crystal form. It's not solid still, it's still only made of light, but all of the goo is leaving you. And as it leaves you, all of your negativities are being purified, and they're going into the earth where they are joyously received by all of your karmic creditors. And then once all of the negativities have passed from your body into the ground, the rejoicing continues, the earth closes up, and then you fill up with this white nectar. Almost this crystalline light form of you fills up with white nectar all the way to the top of the crown of your head, to that opening. Remember the opening? And a little of it spouts out the top as an offering to the Buddha Vajrasattva. And then once this has happened and this little spouting of the nectar has happened, you can begin the entire process again. It's almost like someone hits a reset button, and then once again, you are your ordinary self. Vajrasattva is above your head. As you recite the mantra, the nectar flows and fills Vajrasattva's body from the bottom to the top. The excess comes out, his large toe of his right foot comes into your aperture at the top of your head. All of your negativities coalesce into negative beings and goo. They pass out of your body into the earth, which opens to receive them. And inside the earth are all of your karmic creditors in the form of monsters that receive it and are glad that they now have your repayment. They have your flesh and blood. They have everything they want from you, that they are fully and completely satisfied. Then when you're emptied, the earth closes up, you fill up with nectar again, and the process continues. Now, some people say to me, how is it possible to recite this mantra, this 100-syllable mantra, when I don't know it, and visualize this at the same time? Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche acknowledges that this is challenging. So he says, if you would like to, you can recite the mantra several times and then do one cycle of the purification without a mantra, or reciting Om Bedza Sato Hong or Om Vajrasattva Hong. You don't get to count those mantras, but there's the little mantras. But that way you can serially do the visualized purification so that you feel that you've done it. And after one cycle of the visualized purification, then you recite more mantras, whatever number you like. And then you would stop and then do another cycle of the visualization and so on. The key is to complete the cycle of visualization. Don't ever stop in the middle, he said. Just always complete your cycle of visualization. And in that way, you think that you have purified your negativities. Now, when you've done this, when you've completed as many of these as you're going to complete for your session, and you can count all of these mantras toward your Ngondro accumulation if you wish. At the end, if I were you, I would do some fulfillment mantras. I would do as many proportionally, as you can. So let's say you've recited 21, Vajrasattva mantras. Well, if it's one for every 10, then you would do at least 2 more as a fulfillment for that. And if you do 100, you would do at least 8 for that. People say, what happens to those extra 8 mantras? Do those extra 8 mantras tally up to the 111,111? I say no. They're extra. They're even extra. So if you want to do 8, even if you've only done 20 recitations of your Vajrasattva mantra and you want to do 8, do 8. The idea is that you need to do extra as a way of purifying any mistakes. And you can make the choice for now as to how many you do. But using the fulfillment formula, you could do that as well. But you don't count those extras. They don't get counted. They're your fulfillment. So anyway, this is something that you can work on as time goes along. In fact, now that I've said that, instead of doing the proportional ones, do 8. Just do 8, because that way you're covered and you don't have to worry about the fulfillment proportions. Just do, when you've finished as many mantras as you're going to do 8 more. That would be a good step. Then when you have finished, you then pray and ask for Vajrasattva's blessing. You say the prayer in Tibetan begins Gunpo, and it says, "Oh, protector, unknowingly and in ignorance, I have gone against and violated my Samaya vows." Samaya means the promises that you've made when you took refuge, when you took the Bodhisattva vow, and so on. Lama, protector, please grant me refuge. O supreme Vajra holder, you who have mastery of the great compassion, Lord of beings, I take refuge in you. I confess all my violations of the root and branch vows of body, speech, and mind. Grant your blessing to cleanse and purify all negative actions, obscurations, mistakes, and transgressions. And then one recites the final line, Vajrasattva accepts my request, melts into light, and merges with me. We become inseparable. So then at the conclusion, after having said this prayer, you imagine that the Vajrasattva above your head dissolves into light, merges with you through the top of your head, and that your mind and his mind become one, like water being poured into water. And then you rest for just a moment in the confidence of the merging of your mind and the guru's mind. And that, you could say, is the ultimate purification. After that, after you arise from that meditation, you would immediately turn the page and recite your dedication of merit. So that is the basic practice of the Buddha Vajrasattva. And I'm assuming that there will be questions about this practice. You do not need to do this practice every day, but if you like to, you can. And if you wish to count them, Vajra Master Lama Tobden said you could. And you can count them using what I jokingly call Ngondro math, which is that for every 100, there are 8 extras that you do and you don't get to count, but then you slowly count 111,111. Someone is asking me a question on page 18 of the Tibetan text. The last set, I hear to say Supo Kayome Baba. Is there an inconsistency in the text? Perhaps. Yes, it is possible that there is an inconsistency in the transliteration. We have found typographical errors in this particular Ngondro text. That's a good call out. Let me look and see how it looks in Tibetan in the text that I sent you. This is the KTD monastery text. Manupalaya Benzasato Tena Batita Dudume Baba Suto Kayo. No, Suto. Yeah, it's Suto Kayo Me Baba. Oh yeah. Kayo. Yeah, it says Sutsyo. And so you could say Suto Kayo Me Baba. Yeah. Supo Kayo Me Baba. Yes. There are a couple different ways that you can pronounce this, and I'll show you. It says it could be an inconsistency in the way the text was transliterated. It could be. I generally, when I give this practice to Dharma students, I encourage them to use this pronunciation. Here we go. That is in the separate 2-page pronunciation. Om Benzasato Samaya Manupalaya Benzasato Tenupa Tita Dridume Baba Soto Kayome Baba Supo Kayome Baba Anuratume Baba Sava Siddhi Mentrayatsa Sava Karma Sutsame Sitam Shriya Kuruhong Haha Haha Ho Bhagawen Sarva Tathagata Benza Mame Munsa Benzi Bawa Ma Samaya Sato Ah. And you can see there's a translation of the mantra in this particular version of the text. So it is possible, to my questioner on Zoom, it is possible that there is an inconsistency there. And I'd have to ask the lamas to look at it at KTD and comment as to how they'd like that to see that reconciled. But we have a few more minutes if people have some questions about this. Yes, sir.
Just to clarify, for calculations, we're using a mala, using one full circle, which is 108 beads, but I count 100.
Yep. Oh, you know what? Could I ask you to ask this on the microphone? I totally forgot to ask you to do that, if you wouldn't mind. Yeah, I'm very sorry. Yeah, yeah, because that way it will help.
Okay, how about now?
Yeah, thank you so much.
Excellent, thank you. So my question is about the number of recitations.
Sure.
If I'm using a mala
Yeah.
and there's 108 beads, I go all the way around, but I'm only recording 100 on my piece of paper. What is my end goal? Is that 100,000 or 111,000?
111,000, 111 using this method.
Okay.
So, and so to get granular about it, as they say in business meetings, you would recite one mantra for each bead. Most of these malas have 108 beads, but you would only count 100 of each. Now, this means that there were 8 fulfillment mantras that you never get to count, ever. But as you are counting these, eventually you will get to 111,111 using this method of counting each mala as 100. Does that?
So
Yeah, because there's got to be some remaining uncertainty.
so is it 100,000 if I'm using the mala and I'm counting one full circle as
No.
100?
No, it's not.
So it is 111,000.
It's 111,111
Okay.
using this method of
Okay.
counting each mala as 100.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
And some people, when they hear this, because I try to give a lecture on what I jokingly call Ngondro math. Anyway, Ngondro arithmetic or Ngondro math. And it's weird, but some people freak out because they didn't count them, and it's okay. You can start counting from where you are using the method now. It's fine. Okay.
Is there time for a follow-up?
Yes, there's
Okay.
time for a follow-up.
Just curious, the visualization that you were describing, the earth opens up, all the detritus running down. Is that similar to the feeding the hala wrathful section that we did in the Chidlujin practice?
Oh, I
with the-
can't comment on that right now.
Okay,
I'm sure there are nuances that are very similar to the visualizations that are taught in the traditions, the various traditions of Chö or
Mhm.
severance. I'm sure there's some relationship, but oh boy, I dare not try to answer that question because I do not know the answer.
okay, thank you.
Yeah, okay, no problem. We have a question online. We have, when and where will this recording be found? Oh yeah, okay. This recording will be on YouTube, on the Columbus KTC YouTube page sometime in the next week. I don't know when precisely it will appear. But once it is up on, I have to make sure that it's been edited the right way and that we have the edited copy without the stuff that's not supposed to be there in it and all that. And once I know that we've got it and we upload it to YouTube, then we will send a link to everyone who is registered here. Anyone who registered for this class. If you didn't register for the class, you can write to me at Lama Kathy at columbusktc.org, LAMAKATHY. And so forth. Folks who watch this afterwards, sorry, I may not be able to send you all the goodies, but we will try to find a way to post them online so that people can download the entire packet under like Vajrasattva class packet. And then we'll have everything online for you to download. I think that might be the easiest way to do it. Next, my teacher once said that the instantaneously arising is equal to the gradual arising of the meditation with the syllables and lotus. I am familiar with the practice and his appearance, but I have no problem visualizing with his attributes. So it's no problem that he arises in an instant. Can I practice this instantaneously arising with Vajrasattva above my head, or should I build up the visualization gradually with the syllables and so on? No, it's actually fine. It's actually fine to do it instantaneously. There is no fault in doing it that way. Absolutely no fault in doing it that way. So it's not a problem. Then in the description of Vajrasattva visualization, the negativity leaves one's body, then the body fills into a crystal form. Actually, as the negativity is leaving your body, I kind of compare it to like a plunger that is like this column of white liquid that is pushing down all of our negativities so that we gradually become crystalline beings. Does that make sense? And that as all the negativity is going out, our crystalline form is revealed, and that the negativities continue to go out the bottom of us. And and then once all of the negativities are gone, then we, as the crystalline form, then fill up with the Amrita of purity. Does that, okay? So let's see if this fits the person's question. I had been under the impression that the procedure of filling the body and sending the light or nectar from one's body to Vajrasattva as an offering only comes at the conclusion of the practice, i.e., the last 10 mantras in a set of 108, and not on each recitation. Actually, you're right. It doesn't happen on each recitation of the Om Benzasato Samaya, because this visual, I'm glad you brought this up. Thanks so much for bringing that up, because some people do come away from these classes with the erroneous notion that one cycle of visualization is done for each recitation of the 100-syllable mantra, and that is not the case. That is not the case. So this was not the gentleman's question, sorry. This was not the gentleman's question, but I do need to say this, and that is that you do the cycle of visualization, starting with Vajrasattva's body filling up with white nectar, then overflowing into your body slowly emptying of negativity, it going into the earth and feeding the karmic creditors, and then the earth closing up, and then you filling up, and then a little bit of the nectar spouts out the top of your head at the end of the visualization cycle. At the end of the visualization cycle, I was taught by my teacher to do it at the end of each visualization cycle. Now, this is not equal to one recitation of the mantra. It'd be virtually impossible to recite one mantra per one cycle. It would be overwhelming. It would be absolutely overwhelming. And this is why Rinpoche said it was okay to do it as once you get the mantra memorized, once you get the 100-syllable mantra memorized. So what I did was I memorized the mantra first before I even started the practice. I worked on memorizing the mantra so that I didn't have to think about it while doing the visualization. But if it's too difficult to do the visualization while reciting, Rinpoche said Khenpo Karthar said that it is permissible to do a cycle of the visualization without mantra recitation, and then recite some mantras without the visualization. It's fine to do them in two pieces. So let's see if this addresses the second part of the gentleman's question. Does one make the offering at the end of each 100-syllable mantra? Yeah, this was the misunderstanding. Or does one wait till the end, right? So yeah, this person was under the impression that you did one cycle of visualization for each 100-syllable mantra. So I'm glad I clarified that. It's going on in the background. It's, will probably recite several 100-syllable mantras per cycle of visualization. Several. You can't even, you just, your mileage may vary. Second question, does the offering to Vajrasattva exit the body in the form of nectar or light? It's both. It's both. Rinpoche said specifically it is light, but it acts like a liquid. So that's a paradox. And so we have to just do our best. It's our imagination, which is great because we can imagine light in the form of a liquid, because we can do that with our imagination. So hopefully that's helpful. Okay, any questions from here? Yes. And these will be the last questions. We're going to run over about 5 minutes. I'm sorry. Yeah.
So this has to do with the visualization. So when we are visualizing while reciting the mantra, at what points do we visualize what? So say we start the visualization when we start reciting the mantra, if that's correct. Then we go through, and over the course of time, as we're going around our mala and, we're keeping reciting, we do different things when, or
Oh, I
does
see
that
what
matter?
you're saying. Yeah, there's no key. They are actually separate actions. The mantra recitation and the visualization are not keyed to one another in any way at all. And so how this would work, I'm going to pantomime how it would work, okay? So I'm reciting Om Bedzasato Samaya Manapalaya Bedzasato. And so now what's happening is while I'm reciting Om Bedzasato Samaya Manapalaya Bedzasato Tena, but so he's filling up. Now what? Now it's coming out. Earth is opening up. Ha 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 ho bhagavan savadagata benzamami mutabezi ma sami satawa om bezasatazamaya manapalaya bezasato dana batita ridame baba sutagoyame baba subagoyame baba anaratame baba sarvasati mentorets savakama sutame sitam shriya kuruhum ha 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 ho bhagavan savadagata benzamami mutabezi ma sami satawa om bezasatazamaya manapalaya bezasato dana batita ridame baba sutagoyame baba subagoyame baba anaratame baba. And now the earth is closing up. Okay. Om Visasatas Maya Manapalaya, Visasato Dana Batita, Maya Baba Sudakoya, Maya Baba Subakoya, Maya Baba Anarata, Maya Baba Sarvasiti Midra, Savakamazuta, Maya Sitam, Shriya, Kurahung, Ha 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 Ha, Ho Bhagavan, Zavadagata, Benzamami, Mutsapazi Pama, Sami Satoa. Om Visasatas Maya Manapalaya, Visasato Dana Batita, Maya Baba Sudakoya, Maya Baba. See, you get the idea. There's just no correspondence at all. You just recite the mantra as you are doing the visualization, but they're not keyed to one another in any way. Does that clarify it?
Yeah, that makes a lot more sense than what I was thinking. Because I was thinking,
Yeah.
if you're doing around a mala, then you would visualize
At a
it
certain point,
at a
yeah,
certain
no,
point or whatever.
And I'm really, really glad you asked this question, because I think what happens is that because so many things are keyed to one, to one another, so many things are keyed to happen at the same time, that that we're used to that. Because I mean, it's that way in Chenrezi practice, for example, we say specific words, we visualize specific things. You would think that the mantra and this would work the same way, but they don't. Because this is about the cycle of visualization is about your interior imaginary relationship, with Vajrasattva, and the sincerity of your wish to be purified, and the sincerity, of his wish to purify you. So it's like there's a lot going on, and your attention may move among things. Like for a while, maybe you'll be thinking about the sound of the mantra. For a while, maybe you'll be really, really with the visualization. And sometimes when you're tired of doing the visualization, Rinpoche said, just recite the mantra and don't worry about the visualization for a while. If your mind gets tired, just let the, keep counting. Because
So,
you're counting mantra visual, you're counting mantra recitations, not cycles of visualization. Does that help?
so just kind of get a feel for it as you go along
You
through the
do
practice.
get a feel and a rhythm for it over time. Yeah. But if you continue to have questions about it, just let me know and we'll clarify it. Okay.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
Okay, great. Any other questions? Okay, one more. So you can, for example, recite a whole mala of mantras that will be concluded with a whole visualization. Well, that depends on individuals. That depends on individuals, because some people, if they string out the visualization too long, they get lost. They forget where they were. So you have to find the happy medium for you. Because if you try to do it too fast, you'll get confused. The visualization too fast, you'll get confused. And if you try to do it too slow, you'll get lost and confused. So you can't, again, you just cannot work out a correspondence. But the most important thing is to practice in some way, practice the 4 powers of confession here. When you're saying the prayer to Vajrasattva, you're completely relying on him. Buddha Vajrasattva, please purify me, right? And so then, be really present with that. really feel the regret as your negativities leave you. If you have specific things you're concerned about, think about those and see them going and leaving you. You know, so I think these visualizations become personal to us over time, and they become really effective. The person was asking, how do you know if it's effective? In the Torch of True Meaning, Jamgon Khantrul the Great says, well, for example, you might actually begin to dream, not just once, but repeatedly, not just once, but repeatedly, of snowfall, snow, you know, falling on you, or someone giving you white clothing. It'll either happen in real life or it'll happen in dreams, but it'll happen repeatedly. And, you know, or that you feel, your body feels light. You feel like you have less need for things. You know, you feel more satisfied with life and things like that. So there are lots of signs that it's successful. So anyway, so because of time, we'll have to stop. And oh, someone is saying, just to be sure, when visualizing, Vajrasattva and myself are facing the same direction, and the answer is yes. Okay, very good. That you're, and I borrowed this mala, which is it's like an opalescent color, but it's traditional to use either a crystal or a white bead mala for Vajrasattva practice. You don't have to. In fact, for most of mine, I used a regular mala. It doesn't really matter, but some people like to have the different colors of malas for that. Well, because of time, we'll have to stop here. But I'm super glad that folks asked me to teach this because people asked it once. Vajramaster Lama Tobden gave the empowerment. They said, well, what can we do to make good use of this empowerment that we've received? And knowing that through the teachings on impermanence and change, that we can actually change and purify our karma, it's fabulous. And so my aspiration is for all of you who receive this empowerment to be able to practice this in a way that is useful to you. And if you have questions, you can definitely ask. But now let's sit quietly, and I will do a mental dedication of merit since we're running a little bit long. We mentally extend goodness, the goodness of this practice, to all suffering beings. We make the aspiration that all beings everywhere are freed from their suffering, come to happiness and then to Buddhahood. And coming to Buddhahood, may they emanate in all directions and benefit sentient beings endlessly. We mentally dedicate the goodness with this thought in mind. All right, thanks everyone. Thank you so much, and thank you to the volunteer team, the greeters, the shrine folks, everybody. Thank you so much, and AV. Thank you back at the AV desk. Really appreciate it. May all beings benefit. Om Mani Padme Hum.
Benza Satahong. Bye.